Public 110, 53, October, well, 2007, 9/11, Commission Implementation, Section 1514, Statewide Amtrak Security Upgrade, 60 United States Code 1164. In general, the grant subjection B, the Secretary of Constellation Administrator of the Transportation Secretary Administration is authorized to make grants of Amtrak in accordance with the provisions of this section. 2. The general purpose. The Secretary may such grants for the purpose of A. Protecting underwater underground assets system, B. Protecting high-risk, high-consequent assets identified through the system-wide assets, C. The providing counterterrorism secretary training, D. The providing visible and predictable differences, E. The conducting emergency prepared drillness exercises. 3. Specific projects. The Secretary shall make such grants. A state listing of the District of Columbia to the subject. Secure major tunnels, access points, ensuring that tunnel integrity to New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. B. To secure Amtrak's trains. C. To secure Amtrak stations. D. To watchlist identification system approved of the Secretary. E. To training, tracking, interoperable communication systems coordinated with the federal, state, local agencies, and tribal governments to maximum extent possible. F. The hire, train, employ police secretary officers, including K-9 units assigned to full-time security counterterrorism duties to the railroad transportation. G. For the operational capital costs associated with Secretary awareness prepared for response training, including training under Section 1517, training developed by a university, installation, higher education, and a nonprofit employee lower labor organization for the railroad employees, including frontline employees, age for living, similitude exercises, including exercise described in 1516 grants. B. The conditions of the Secretary shall be awarded to the Amtrak under the section of projects contained within the system-wide security approved by the Secretary developed pursuant to Section 1512. Note deadline no later than 5 business days awarding to the grant Amtrak under section. The Secretary shall transfer the grants under the Secretary of Transportation to be dispersed to the Amtrak equitability geographical allocation. The Secretary shall ensure the subject to meeting the highest security needs of the Amtrak entire system consistent with the risk assessment required under Section 1511. Amtrak vulnerability assessment security plans developed under Section 1512 stations. Facilities located outside the northern east corridor received an equitable share of security funds authorized by this section. D. Availability funds in general out funds appropriated pursuant to Section 1114 B. 11.4 W. The 49 United States Code is amended in Section 1503 title. There should be made available for Secretary, Administrator of Transportation Administration to carry out the section of $150 million fiscal year 2008, $150 million in 2009, $175 million in 2010, $175 million in 2011. The availability appropriated funds amounts pursuant to the paragraph 1 should remain available until expended. Section 1515 Fire, Life, and Safety Improvements, 6 United States Code 1165 Appropriation Authorization Grant State Listing District of Columbia. A. The life state safety needs. He authorized to be appropriated to Secretary of Transportation for making grants to the Amtrak purposes carrying out of the projects to make fire, life, safety improvements of the Amtrak tunnels northeast corridor of the following amounts for the 6 New York, New Jersey tunnels to provide ventilation, electricity, fire safety technology improvements, emergency communication lighting systems, emergency access and egress, and for passengers, $25 million for the fiscal year of 2008, $30 million for the fiscal year of 2009, $45 million for the fiscal year of 2010, $60 million 2011 for the Baltimore Potomac Tunnel, the Union Tunnel together to provide adequate drainage and ventilation, communication, lighting, sandpiping, and passenger egress improvements. $5 million for the fiscal years of 2008, 2009, 2010 for the Union Station tunnels of the District of Columbia to improve ventilation, communication, lighting, and passenger egress improvements. $5 million throughout the fiscal years of 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011. Infrastructure upgrades out of the funds appropriated pursuant to the 1503. There should be available Secretary of Transportation fiscal year of 2008, $3 million for a preliminary design option of the new tunnel on a different alignment augmented with the capacity existing of the Baltimore tunnels. Availability amounts. The amounts appropriated pursuant to the section shall be available until expended. D. The plans require the Secretary of Transportation may not make available AMMTRAK obligations expendatory under the section 1 until AMMTRAK has submitted the Secretary of Transportation. Security Transportation has approved engineering financial planning for such projects. And 2, unless each project funded pursuant of the section Secretary of Transportation has approved for the project management prepared for the AMMTRAK to see the review plans. 1. General Secretary of Transportation shall complete the review plan required under subsection D. Approve, disapprove of the plan 45 days after the date of each such plan to be submitted by the AMMTRAK. 2. Incomplete, deficient plan. The Secretary of Transportation determines the plan incomplete, deficient. Secretary of Transportation shall notify AMMTRAK that the incomplete deficiency. AMMTRAK shall, within 30 days after receiving the Secretary of Transportation notification, shall be modified in the Secretary of Transportation review. 3. The approval plan within 15 days of receiving additional information previously included in the plan. Within 45 days receiving the items newly included, modified Secretary of Transportation shall either approve by the modified plan or the Secretary of Transportation is still incomplete and deficient. Secretary of Transportation A. Identifying the writing of the appropriate congressional committees of the proper portions of planning and Secretary finds incomplete deficiency. B. The approval of other portions of the plan. C. Obligating associated with the portions. And D. Executing an agreement AMMTRAK within 15 days thereafter. Process resolving the remaining portions of the plan. F. Financial contribution from other than a tunnel user of the Secretary of Transportation, taking into account needed for the timely completion of all portions of the tunnel projects described in subsection A, and considering the extent of the railroad carriers over the AMMTRAK use of the plan of the tunnels. 2. Consider feasibility of seeking financial contributes other than the railroad carriers toward the cost of the project. 3. Obtaining the financial commission contributions commitments for other such railroad carriers at level reflecting of the extent of the use of planned tunnels is feasible. 6. United States Code 1166 Section 1516 Railroad Carrier Exercises. In general, Secretary shall establish a program conducting the Secretary exercise of railroad carriers for the purpose of assessing and improving capabilities and entities described in subsection B to prevent, the prepare, mitigate, respond to the recovery of terrorism covered entries. The entities assessed under the program shall include federal, state, local agency, tribal governments through railroad governments. Areas 3. Government, non-governmental emergency response providers, law enforcement agencies, rail, the road, transit, police as appropriate, and organization. Entity Secretary determines the appropriate seat. The retirement shall ensure that the program considers the security exercising railroad carriers. The extreme administrative department and Department of Transportation is joined to determine Secretary and Secretary of Transportation. Unless Secretary waives the consolidation requirements as appropriate, can consist of exercises that are scale tailored needed to the carrier and addressing the needs of elderly individual with disability. B. Live in case of most risk facilities to the terrorist attack. C. Coordinated with appropriate officials. And D. As realistic practicable based on a current risk of assessment, including credible threats of vulnerability consequences. E. Inclusive appropriate for our road frontline employees. F. Consistent with National Incident Management System, National Response Plan, National Infrastructure Protection Plan, National Prepared Guidance, National Prepared Goals, and other such national initiatives. And 3rd, the exercises described in 2 will be A. Evaluated for Secretary against clear and consistent performance measures. B. Assessed for the Secretary to identify the best practices which are shared by the appropriate carriers, nonprofit organizations representing railroad carrier employees, federal, state, local, and tribal official government, non-governmental emergencies response providers, law enforcement personnel, including personnel, railroad carrier, transit, police, and other stakeholders. C. Develop recommendations as appropriate. Secretary to railroad carriers, remedial action had to be taken in response of lesson learned. Allows proper advance notification of communities, local government in which the exercises are to be held as appropriate. 5. The assist of state, local, tribal governments and railroad carriers. Design and implementation, evaluation, additional exercises conform requirements of paragraph 1D National Exercise Program. The Secretary shall ensure that the exercise program developed under subsection C is component with National Exercise Program established under Section 648 Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of Public 109-295, 6 United States Code 748. 1517 Security Training Program, 6 United States Code 1167, and D deadline guidelines in general. No later than 6 months after the date of the enactment of the Act, the Secretary shall develop and issue regulation for the training program and prepare frontline employees of the potential security threats and conditions. The regulation shall, in consideration any certain current security training requirement or best can be consultant. The Secretary shall develop a regulation under subsection A and consultant with appropriate law enforcement, fire services, emergency response, secretary terrorism expertise, 2 railroad carriers, 3 railroad shippers, and 4 nonprofit employee labor organizations representing railroad employees, emergency response personnel. C program and elements of regulation developed under subsection A and shall require security training described in subsection A and to include a minimum elements to address the following as is capable: 1. Determination of seriousness of any occurrence or threat. 2. The crew and passenger communication and coordination. 3. Appropriate response of defending and protecting oneself. Use of personal other protective equipment. 5. Evacuation procedure. Passenger railroad employees, including individuals with disabilities and elderly. 6. Psychology, behavior, methods of terrorism, including observation and analysis. 7. Training related psychological response to terrorist incident, including ability to cope with a hijacker before passengers response. Live station training exercises regarding various of the threat conditions and tunnel excavation procedures. 9. Recognition or reporting dangerous situations or dangerous substances, the suspicious packages situations. 10. Understanding security incident procedures, including procedures, communication, governmental, non-governmental response providers for a one-season interaction or such emergency response providers. 11. Operational maintenance of security equipment system. 12. The other security training activities of security considered appropriate. D. Deadlines of required programs. 1. Development submission Secretary not later than 90 days after the Secretary issued regulation under subsection A. The railroad carrier developed a security training program in accordance with section submitting the program security for the approval. 2. The approval of the disapproval not later than 60 days after security training proposed under the subsection. Security shall approve the program to require a railroad carrier to develop the program to make a revision of program that's considered necessary of the program to meet requirements of this section. A railroad carrier should respond to Secretary commitments as 30 days after receiving. 3. Training no later than 1 year after the Secretary approves the Secretary training program in accordance with subsection railroad carrier that developed the program shall complete the training for all railroad frontline employees who are hired and carry on more than 30 days preceding such date. For such employed less than 30 days, the carrier preceding such date training shall be completed within the first 60 days of employment. Update regulations, program revisions. The Secretary should periodically update and appropriate training regulations issued in subsection A and reflect the changing security threats in each railroad carrier. They shall revise the training program accordingly, provide additional training as necessary in frontline employees within a reasonable time after the regulations updated. National Training Program. The Secretary shall ensure the training program developed under subsection A is component with National Training Program established under Section 648 of Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of Public Law 109-295, 6 United States Code 748. Reporting requirements no later than 2 years after the date of regulation issued. The Secretary shall review the implementation of training. A representative sample railroad cars ran railroad frontline employees reported the appropriate congressional committee to the number of reviews conducted and result of such reviews. The Secretary may submit a report in classified, redacted, and formats as necessary. Other employees, the Secretary shall issue the guidance best practice railroad shipper employee security program containing the elements listed under subsection C. Guidance 1518 Railroad Security Research Development. Establish research development and the Secretary acting under Secretary of Science, Technology, Administrating, Transportation Security Administrator shall carry out the research development program as purpose improving the Secretary of the Railroad Transportation System. B. Including eligible products. The research development program may include 1. Reduce vulnerability of passenger train stations equipment to explosive, hazardous, chemical, biological, radioactive substances, including developing technology to screen passengers in large numbers of peaks, commuting times, minimal interference with disruption. To test the new emergency response recovery technologies include international bridges or international borders. 3. Develop improved railroad security technologies, including A. Technology from ceiling modified railroad tanker cars. B. Automatic inspection of railroad cars. C. Communication based on training controls. D. Emergency response training, including training of tunnel environment. E. Secretary redundancy and critical communication, electrical power commuter training control system. F. The technology of securing bridges and tunnels. 4. The test wayside detectors to detect tampering. 5. Support enhanced security of transportation, security intensive material of the railroad to mitigate damages event of the cyber attack. And 7. To address vulnerabilities risk identified in the Secretary, coordinated with the research initiatives of the Secretary. Public Law 11053, August 3rd, 2007, 121, Stat 442. 1. Shall ensure that the research and development program consistent with the national strategy of railroad transportation security developed under the subsection Section 1511 and any other transportation security research development program required in this Act. 2. The extended practical coordinated research and development activities department with other ongoing research development security related initiatives, including research being conducted by A. The Department of Transportation, including university transportation centers of the institute centers and simulators funded in the Department of Transportation. B. The National Academy of Scenes, the Technical Support Working Group. D. The Federal Department of Agencies. E. The Federal Privacy Research Laboratories, research universities, institutions, higher education, historical black colleges, University Hispanic Service Institution, Indian tribally controlled colleges and universities. 3. They shall carry the research development project authorized in section of reimbursal agreement with an appropriate funding federal agency if agency A currently sponsors a research development project in similar area. B. Unique facility capability that would be useful and carry out the project. 4. And maybe award grants that enter cooperative agreement contracts, transactions, reimbursement agreements to the entities described in paragraph 2. The eligible grant recipients under section 1513 shall make a reasonable enters to enter the memorandum of understanding contract grants cooperative agreements of transaction railroad cars willing to contribute both physical space or other resources. D. The privacy, civil rights, civil liberties issues consultant in carrying out research and development projects in section. The Secretary shall consult with the Chief Privacy Officer Department of the Office of Rights of Civil Liberties Department as appropriate in accordance to 222 Homeland Security Act of 2002, 6 United States Code 142 Privacy Impact Assessment in accordance with section 222 of 705 Homeland Security Act of 2002, 6 United States Code 142345. The Chief Privacy Officer shall conduct privacy impacting assessment officer rights of civil liberties and shall conduct reviews appropriated for the research development initiatives developed under the section. Secretary determines that could have impact on the privacy, civil rights, or civil liberties. E. Authorization appropriations in general on outside approved persistent 114W with the Title 49 United States Code as amended in section 1503 shall be made available. Secretary to carry out the section $33 million official year of 2008. $33 million for the fiscal years of 2009 and 10 and 11. Periodically, 2 period of availability, such sums shall remain available until expended. Section 1519, Railroad Tanker Car Security Testing. A railroad tanker car vulnerability assessment. Secretary shall assess the likely methods of deliberate terrorist attacks against railroad tanker cars used in transportation, toxic inhalation, hazardous materials, and method assess the degree that in which success causing death, injury, and serious adversity affects the human health and environmental critical information, national security, national economy, public warfare. Threats in carrying out paragraph 1, the Secretary considers the most current threat information is likely to methods of a successful terrorist attack on a railroad tanker car transporting toxic inhalation hazardous material. May consider A. Explosive devices placed on the tracks attached to the railroad tanker car. B. The use of missiles, grenade, rocket, mortars, or high-caliber weapons against a railroad tanker car. C. The physical testing. In developing assessment required under paragraph 1, the Secretary should conduct a physical testing vulnerability of railroad tanker cars used in transportation toxic hazard materials to different methods of deliberate attack of using technical information criteria to evaluate structural integrity of railroad tanker cars. 4. Report no later than 30 days of completion of the assessment of paragraph 1. The Secretary shall provide the appropriate congressional committees as a research appropriate format as such assessment. D. The railroad tanker car dispersion model. In general, the Secretary, acting through the National Infrastructure Simulation Analysis Center, shall conduct air dispersion model analysis to release a scenario of toxic inhalation hazardous material resulting in terrorist act on a loaded railroad tanker car carrying such materials as an urban or rural environments. B2. Consider air analysis under subsection shall take into account in the following consideration. A. The most likely means of attack resulting dispersal rate. B. The different times of day of counting difference of the cloud coverage and other atmospheric conditions of an environment being modeled. C. The difference of population size and density. D. The historical accurate wind speeds, temperatures, wind directions. E. The difference of dispersal rates and other relevant factors related to the railroad tanker car in motion and stationary. Emergency response procedures of loading officials. G. Any other consideration Secretary believes would develop an accurate dispersion model of the toxic inhalation hazardous material released on railroad tanker car as a result of the terrorist act. 3. The constellation conducting a dispersion modeling under paragraph 1 shall consult a Secretary of Transportation hazardous material expert, railroad carriers, nonprofit employee labor organization representation, railroad employees, appropriate state, local, and tribal officers, officials of the other federal agencies as appropriate for information sharing using completion of the annual required under paragraph 1. Secretary shall share the information developed in appropriate stakeholder and giving appropriate information protection provisions as may be required. And Secretary 5. Report no later than 30 days after completion of dispersion analysis under paragraph 1. The Secretary shall submit to appropriate congressional committees report detailing Secretary conclusion finding an appropriate findings in an appropriate format. Deadline. Section 1520 Railroad Threat Assessment. No later than 1 year after the date of an enactment of the Secretary shall complete a name, basis, security background analysis against a consolidated terrorist watch list immigration status checklist for all railroad frontline employees, similar to the threat assessment screening program through the facility employed longshore commandment of the Coast Guard of the Under Coast Guard of United States Coast Guard 2006 24 189 71 Federal Railroad Street 25066 April 8, 2008 2006. Section 1521 Railroad Employee Protection. Section 20109 of Title 49 United States Code is amended to read. Section 2109 Employee Protection. In general, a railroad carrier engaged in interstate or foreign commerce, a contract, a subcontract of such railroad carrier, officer, employee such as a railroad carrier may not discharge, demote, suspend, reprimand, or any other way discriminate against an employee, and if such discrimination is due in whole part of the employee lawful good faith act done preserved by employer to have been done about to be done. 1. Provided information directly, use of information provided otherwise directly into the investigation regarding to conduct the employee responsible believes in constituting a violation of federal law, rule or regulation relating to railroad safety, security, or gross fraud, waste, and abuse of federal grants or other public funds intended to use as railroad safety security. The information assistance provided by the investigation stemming of the providing information is conducted a federal, state, local regulatory law enforcement agency, including official inspector general under the Inspector General Act of 1978, 5 U.S. Standard Code App, Public Law 95-452. A member of Congress or any committee Congress of the government accountability officers. A person, supervisor, authorities, or employee such as a person who has authority to investigate, discover, terminate, and misconduct, to refuse, violated, assistant violation of any federal law or regulation relating to the federal safety. Secretary to file a complaint directly caused to be brought in proceeding related to the enforcement of the part as applicable Railroad Safety Security Chapter 51, 57 of this title is testifying and providing notifying attempt to the railroad carrier, Secretary of Transportation, work-related personnel injury, a work-related illness, and employee. 5 to cooperate in safety security investigation, Secretary of Transportation, Security, Homeland Security, National Transportation Safety Board. 6 Transportation, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Homeland Security, National Transportation Safety Board, Federal, State, Local, Regulatory, Law Enforcement Agency relating to an accident, incident resulting in injury and death to the individual, damaged party, or occurring connection to the railroad transportation. 7 To accurately report hours of duty pursuant to Chapter 211. Hazardous safety and secondary conditions. A railroad carrier engaged in interstate foreign commerce, officers employed with railroad carrier shall discharge, demote, suspend, reprimand, or any other discrimination against an employee. A reporting good faith hazardous safety and security condition, refusing the work or confronted hazardous safety security condition related to the performance of employee duties in the condition described in paragraph 2. Exits of refusing. Authors of safety related equipment track structures, employee responsibility for inspection, repair equipment track structures. Employee believes that the equipment and track structures are hazardous safety security conditions. If the condition describes in paragraph 2, a refusal is protected under the paragraph 1, B, and C, and if A is refusable by good faith and not responsible, alternative refuse is available. Employee B, a responsible individual circumstance confronting employee with conduct. I, hazardous conditions represent an imminent danger of death and serious injury to the current urgency situation that does not allow sufficient time to eliminate the danger without such refusal, and C, the employee with possible notified the railroad carrier existence of hazardous condition and the intention not perform further work or not authorize use of hazardous equipment track structures unless conditioned correctly immediately, or the equipment of the track structures are repaired properly or replaced. Applicability in subsection paragraph 1A, they shall apply the security personnel employed by the railroad carrier to protect the individual property transported by the railroad. C, the enforcement action. In general, an employee who alleges, discharges, and disciplines and discriminates in violation of subsection A or B may relief in accordance with the provision and with an intention or request for relief in section initiated for the filling compliant Secretary of Labor. 2 Procedures. An action under paragraph 1 shall the governor govern under the rules procedures set forth by section 421.21 B, including burdens of proof. Any action brought underneath C1 are governed by legal burdens of proof set forth in section 421.21b. Statute of limitations. An action under paragraph 1 shall be commenced not later than 180 days after the date of alleged violation of subsection A and B of the section. Core C. 3. The civil actions and enforcement. If a person fails to comply with an order issued Secretary of Labor pursuant to the procedures of section 421.21b, a Secretary of Labor may bring the civil action to the enforced order of the district order of the United States or jurisdiction in which the violation occurred set forth by 421.21. Exception notification may be under section 421.21 B1 shall be made by the person's name and the compliant and the person employed. De novo review with respect to the compliant under the paragraph, Secretary of Labor not issue for the final decision 210 A after filing a complaint, and the delay is not due to the bad faith of the employee that the employee knew to bring of the original action to the law equity of de novo. Review is an appropriate district of the United States while she has a jurisdiction other than the action within the other regard to the amount of controversy within the action, and request either party to such action to be carried out by the court or jury. For appeals, any person advisedly affected aggrieved by an order of pursuant procedure in section 421.21 may obtain a review in orders under the United States Appeals Circuit in which the violation respect of the order is issued alleged or occurred in the circuit and compliant with the residue of the day and of such violation. The petition of the review must be filed by no later than 60 days after the date of issuance. File order, Secretary of Labor. The review shall the deadlines. The petition shall must not found later 60 days than the issuance of the final order of Secretary of Labor. The review shall conform to Chapter 7 and Title 5. Commencement of the proceedings under the paragraph shall not, unless ordered by the court appropriated for the state of the order. B. Remedies. In general, the employee prevailing in an action under subsection C shall be entitled to the relief necessary to make the employee whole. To the damages relief in an action of subsection C, including an action described in C3, shall include a reinstatement within the same seniority status that the employee would have, but for the discrimination, any back pay of the insurance C compensatory damages, including compensation for any special damages and sustained result of discrimination, including litigation costs, expertise, witnesses, responsible attorneys. 3. Possible relief of the action under subsection C may include punitive damages in an amount not to exceed $2,500,000. Election of remedies. An employee may not seek to protect under the oath of this section under the provisions for the same alleged unlawful railroad career. Railroad carrier. No preemption. Nothing in section preempts, diminishes, or safeguards against discrimination, demotion, or discharges, suspense, threats, harassment, reprimand, retaliation, any other manner of discrimination provided federal or state law. Rights of the retained by an employee. Nothing in this section shall be deemed diminished, or rights or privilege or remedies of any employee under this federal, state law, under any collective bargain agreement. The rights, remedies in these sections made by the agreement, policy, form, and condition of the employee. The disclosure of the identity, except for provided in paragraph 2, the section is written consistent with the employee. Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Homeland Security may disclose the name of the employee of the railroad carrier who has provided information about the alleged violation of the part of the applicable railroad safety security chart. 5157 title regulation prescribed on an order issued under those provisions. The Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Homeland Security shall disclose an Attorney General for the name of the employee described in paragraph 1. The matter referred to as Attorney General enforcement. The Secretary making a disclosure shall provide a reasonable advance of the affected employee is disclosure of that person's identity and identifying information to occur to process reporting security problems to the Department of Homeland Security. The regulation notice. Establish a process. The state of Homeland Security shall establish those regulations for any operation, notice, comment, process of any person of that report of Homeland Security regarding railroad security problems, deficiencies, and vulnerabilities. To acknowledge the receipts of the report submitted under the paragraph 1 identifies making of the report. The Secretary of Homeland should respond promptly to such a person acknowledge and receipt of the report. 2. This address the problem. The Secretary of Homeland Security shall review and consider the information provided. The report is submitted under paragraph 1 shall take appropriate steps to address the problems, deficiency, and identified. 6. United States Code 1170, Section 1521, security background checks and covered individuals. Definitions. In this section, the following definition applies. 1. A security background check. The security background check means reviewing the possible identifying individuals who may pose a threat to transportation security, national security, or terrorism. A. Criminal history database. And B. In case of an alien, defined in Immigration National Act of United States Code 1101. A. 3. A relevant database determines a status of alien under the immigration laws of the United States. C. Other relevant information database are determined by the Secretary to the covered individual. A covered individual means an employee or a railroad carrier, a contractor, or subcontractor, or railroad carrier. B. The guidance recommendations suggested in action and otherwise disseminated voluntary action items of the Secretary, railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, railroad carrier relating to the performing Secretary background information covered in individual shall contain recommendations, appropriate scope, and application for security background check, including the time period of times disqualifying offenses, redress, and adversely impact covered individuals consistent with subsection C and D, and within 60 days of the date of enactment, a guidance recommendation suggested each of these widely disseminated voluntary action issued to the Secretary prior to the date of enactment act of the railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, railroad carrier relating to performing security background check covered individuals shall be updated compliance with paragraph 1. 3. If the railroad carrier, contractor, or subcontractor or railroad carrier performs security background checks of covered individuals, fulfill guidance in Secretary under paragraph 1 and 2. Secretary shall not consider guidance fulfilled unless an adequate redress process is described in subsection D provided by the covered individuals. C. Requirements issues a rule, regulation, directive requiring railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, railroad carrier to perform a security background check to cover individuals. The Secretary shall prohibit the railroad carrier, subcontractor of a railroad carrier from making adverse employment decisions, including removal or suspension of covered employees due to such regulation. Directives respect to covered individuals unless the railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, railroad contractor determines that the covered individual has been convicted of or has been found not guilty by or reason of insanity, is under warrant or indictment of permanent disqualification. Criminal offenses listed in paragraph part of 1572 Title 49 Code of Federal Regulations. 2. When convicted not of guilty by reason of insanity of an interim disqualifying criminal offense listed in part 1572 of Title 49 Code of Federal Regulations, within 7 years of the date of the railroad carrier, subcontractor of the railroad carrier performs security background checks of or incarcerated for interim disqualifying criminal offenses offense listed by 1572 of Title 49 Code of Federal Regulations, releasing incarceration for 5 years after the date of railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor of the railroad carrier performs a security background check. CD. The reprocess of the security issues regulation directive requiring railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, railroad carrier perform security background check against covered individual and shall the Secretary shall 1. Provide adequate redress process covered individuals subjected adversely to employment decision, including suspension, removal, or suspension of the employee due to such rule, regulation, directive, inconsistent with the appeals and waivers process. Establish applicants of commercial motor vehicle hazardous materials and endorsement and transportation employees as part of is required as Section 70105C, the title of 46 United States Code. 2. They have the authority of appropriate remedy, including reinstatement of covered individuals should the Secretary determine the railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, railroad carrier wrongfully made an adverse employee decision regarding a covered individual pursuant to such rules of regulations, directives. Either false statements of railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, carrier may knowingly misrepresent employee relevation, including the appetite involved in labor attribution application, meaning any rules, regulations, directives, guidances, and used in Secretary-related security background checks requirements for covered individuals conducting background check. Headline regulations. Not later than 1 year after the date of enactment of the Act, the Secretary shall issue a regulation prohibiting railroad carrier, contractor, subcontractor, railroad contractor from knowing misrepresenting to an employee relevant person, including arbiter involved in labor arbitration, for the scope of application, meaning of any rules, regulation, directives, or guidance Secretary related to the Secretary background check requirements for covered individuals when conducting security background checks. 1. Rights of response. Nothing in section shall be construed or bridges railroad carriers, contractors, subcontractors, carrier rights of responsibility to make adverse employment decision prohibited by other than federal, state, local, and laws. Nothing section construed and abridged responsibilities of covered individuals, railroad carriers, a contractor, subcontractor, railroad carrier under federal, state, local laws, and other collective bargain agreements. No premonition, federal, state, local, state law. Nothing within this section construed to preempt the federal, state, or local law requirements of criminal history, background checks, immigration status checks, or other background checks covered in individuals. H. Statutory construction. Nothing in this section shall construct to the effect of the process of review established under Section 70105 of Title 46 United States Code, including regulation and issue pursuant to such sections. Section 1523, Northern Border Railroad Passenger Rail Line. In general, no later than 1 year after the enactment of the Secretary consultant with the Administrator of Transportation Security Administration, the Secretary of Transportation, heads of the appropriate federal departments, agency, AMMTRAK shall transmit a report of appropriate congressional committees that contains 1. Description, current type, system of screening passengers, baggage of passengers, railroad services between the United States and Canada. 2. Assessment and current program to provide for clearance of airline passengers, United States, Canada, and outline agreement of the air transport performance between Government of Canada and the Government of the United States of America, dated January 18, 2001. 3. An assessment current program to provide clearance of freight railroad traffic between the United States, Canada, outline declaration principle, improved security railroad and shipment and Canadian National Railway, Canadian Pacific Railway of the Canadian United States, dated April 2003. Information progressive from the Department of Homeland Security federal agencies toward the financial bilateral protocol and to provide the procurement per passenger or transportation operation between the United States and Canada. 5. The description of legislative, regulatory, budgetary, or policy barriers in the United States government to providing passenger lists of railroad passenger travelers between the United States and Canada to the Department. And 6. The Department position of government Canadian relevant Canadian agencies will respect the procurement of such passengers. 7. The draft changes existing federal necessary provides pre-screening such passengers, providing pre-screened passenger lists of the Department and analysis of feasibility reinstating transit inspection on board internal AMMTRAK trains. Privacy, civil rights, and civil liberty issues. Consultant in preparing report under the section, secretary shall consult with chief privacy and officers, department officers of civil liberties or civil rights and civil liberties department appropriated in accordance with 2222 Homeland Security Act of 2002, the Primary Privacy Act of assessment in accordance with section 222 and 705 of Homeland Security Act of 2002, the report containing the Privacy Act assessment conducted with the Chief Privacy Officer review conducted of officers' civil rights and liberty. And we're at International Railroad Security Safety Program. Section 1524, International Railroad Security Program. A. In general, the Secretary shall develop a system to detect both undeclared passengers, contraband, and primary focus of detection, nuclear, radiological materials entering the United States with the railroad. System requirements in developing the system under the paragraph. Secretary may consult with the Domestic Nuclear Detection Offices, Custom, and the Border and Protection Transportation Security Administration. A. To deploy radiation detection equipment, non-intrusive imaging equipment, locations of railroad shipments cross international borders and to enter the United States. B. To consider integration radiation detection technology, non-intrusive inspection technologies where feasible. C. Ensure appropriate training, operations, response protocols are established in federal, state, local, and personnel. D. Implement alternative procedures and check railroad shipments at the locations of deployment. Non-intrusive inspections. Imaging equipment is determined is not practical. And E. If ensure the acceptable practicable such as technology deployed and can detect terrorist weapons, including weapons of mass destruction. 5. Take actions of appropriate develop systems. B. Additional information. Secretary shall identify, seek, submission additional data to improve high-risk targeted related movement of cargo through the international supply chain utilization road prior to import and utilization. To the utilize data collected and maintained. Secretary of Transportation targeting high-risk cargo identified under paragraph 1. 2 and 3 analysis to provide in subsection to identify high-risk cargo for inspections. The report to Congress no later than September 3rd, 2008. The Secretary shall transmit appropriate congressional committees as a report described in the progress of the system being developed in subsection A. Definitions in the section. International supply chain. The international supply chain means the end of the process of shipping goods from or from the United States, being out of origin, including manufacturer, supply, vendor, through the point of distribution, destination. 2. Radiation detection. Radiation detection means technology capable of detecting and identifying nuclear, radiological material, radiological explosive devices, includes inspection. The inspection means that the comprehensive process of custom, border, and protection to assess the goods of entering the United States, to appraise them for duty purposes, to detect presence of restricted and prohibited items, to ensure compliance with the applicable laws. Section 523. 5. Transmission line and report study. The Comptroller General should undertake an assessment of placement of high voltage, direct current, electric transmission, long active railroad transportation right of way. Conducting assessment, Comptroller General shall evaluate economical safety risks, and benefits of inhabiting, living adjacent to such rights and consumer electrical power transmitted by transmission lines. B. Reportment no later than 6 months after the day of enactment. The Comptroller shall transmit the result of the assessment in subsection of pro-congressional committees. Section 526, Railroad Security Enhancement. A. Railroad Police Officer. Section 28101 or 28101 of Title 49 United States Code is amended by inserting A in general under and 2 and ending on the following. B. Assigning a railroad police officer employed by the Railroad Carrier Certified Commission as a policy offered under the laws of the state of the temporarily assigned to ascend to the second railroad carrier to carrying out law enforcement duties of the request of the second railroad carrier, at which time the police officer is considered an employee of the second railroad carrier shall have the authority to enforce the law of any jurisdiction in which the second carrier owns the property to the same extent as provided in subsection A. Deadline 16 United States Code 1172. Model state and legislation no later than November 2, the Secretary of Transportation shall develop and make available for state model legislation to address possible problems of entities that claim to railroad carriers in order to establish run and police force of the entities do not to the provided railroad transportation developing model state legislation. Secretary shall solicit input states, railroad carriers, and railroad carrier employees. The Secretary shall review, if necessary, revise model state legislation periodically. Section 1527, applicability of District Columbia law of certain AMMTRAK contracts. Section 24301 of Title 49 United State Code is amended by adding the ending of the following. Applicability of the District of Columbia, at least a contract entered in between the AMTRAKs and the State of Maryland as the Department Agency of the State of Maryland after the date of enactment of subsection B shall be governed by the District of Columbia. Section 1528, Railroad Preemption Clarification. Section 20106 of Title 49 United States Code is amended to read as follows. 2106 Preemption. A. National uniformity regulation laws, regulations related to the railroad safety laws, regulations ordered by the Railroad Security shall notify uniform to extend the practicability to the state. It may adopt the continuing enforce of law and regulation related to the railroad safety security of the Secretary of Transportation with respect to the safety matters, or the Secretary of Homeland Security with respect to railroad security matters. Prescribed regulations of the issues under ordering or covering a subject or matter state requirement. The state may adopt and continue to enforce additional stringent law regulations or related to railroad safety security than the laws, regulations, and orders. A is necessary to eliminate, reduce essential law of local safety and security. B, enact incompatible law, regulation, and or the United States of government. D, does not reasonably burden interstate commerce. B, clarification regarding state law causes of action. Nothing in this section shall be construed in preemption. Any action in state law seeking damages for personal injury, death, or property damage alleging to that a party. A, that A has failed to comply with the federal standard care of established regulation under order issued by the Secretary of Transportation with respect to railroad safety matters. Secretary of Homeland Security with respect to railroad security matters and recovering subject was provided by subsection A of the sections. B, they failed to comply with its own plan, rule, or standard created pursuant to regulation or order issued either by secretaries. C, failed to comply with secretary regulations and or do not incompatible with subsection A2. 2, the subsection shall apply to the pending of state law causes applicability of the action rising of the events and activities according to and or after January 18, 2002 jurisdiction. Nothing in this section creates federal cause of action behalf of the injured party who confers a federal question jurisdiction of state law causes of inaction. Subtitle C, over the road busing and tracking. I'm going to stop there.